Chapter 2 of Captains Courageous. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording is by Mark Smith of Simpsonville, South Carolina. Captains Courageous by Rudyard Kipling, Chapter 2.
I warned you, said Dan as the drops fell thick and fast on the dark oiled planking. Dad ain't noways hasty, but you fair earned it. Pshaw! There's no sense takin' on so. Harvey's shoulders were rising and falling in spasms of dry sobbing. I know the feeling. First time Dad laid me out was the last, and that was my first trip. Makes you feel sickish and lonesome. I know. It does, moaned Harvey. That man's either crazy or drunk, and I can't do anything. Don't say that to Dad, whispered Dan. He's set agin all liquor. And, well, he told me you was the madman. What in creation made you call him a thief? He's my dad. Harvey sat up, mopped his nose, and told the story of the missing wad of bills. I'm not crazy, he wound up. Only your father has never seen more than a $5 bill at a time, and my father could buy up this boat once a week and never miss it. You don't know what the We're Here's worth. Your dad must have a pile of money. How did he get it? Dad says loonies can't shake out a straight yarn. Go ahead. In gold mines and things, West. I've read that kind of business. Out West, too. Does he go round with a pistol on a trick pony, same as the circus? They call that the Wild West, and I've heard that their spurs and bridles was solid silver. You are a chump, said Harvey, amused in spite of himself. My father hasn't any use for ponies. When he wants to ride, he takes his car. How? Lobster car? No, his own private car, of course. You've seen a private car some time in your life. Sladen Beeman, he has one, said Dan cautiously. I saw her at the Union Depot in Boston, with 3 niggers hogging her run. Dan meant cleaning the windows. But Sladen Beeman, he owns about every railroad on Long Island, they say, and they say he's bought about half New Hampshire, and run a line fence round her, and filled her up with lions and tigers and bears and buffalo and crocodiles and such all. Sladen Beeman, he's a millionaire. I've seen his car. Yes? Well, my father's what they call a multimillionaire, and he has 2 private cars. One's named for me, the Harvey, and one for my mother, the Constance. Hold on, said Dan. Dad don't ever let me swear, but I guess you can. Before we go ahead, I want you to say hope you may die if you're lying. Of course, said Harvey. That ain't enough. Say, hope I may die if I ain't speaking truth. Hope I may die right here, said Harvey, if every word I've spoken isn't the cold truth. $134 in all? Said Dan. I heard you talkin' to Dad, and I'd half looked you to be swallered up, same as Jonah. Harvey protested himself red in the face. Dan was a shrewd young person along his own lines, and 10 minutes' questioning convinced him that Harvey was not lying much. Besides, he had bound himself by the most terrible oath known to boyhood, and yet he sat alive, with a red-ended nose, in the scuppers, recounting marvels upon marvels. Gosh! said Dan at last, from the very bottom of his soul, when Harvey had completed an inventory of the car named in his honor. Then a grin of mischievous delight overspread his broad face. I believe you, Harvey. Dad's made a mistake for once in his life. He has, sure, said Harvey, who was meditating an early revenge. He'll be mad clear through. Dad just hates to be mistook in his judgments. Dan lay back and slapped his thigh. Oh, Harvey, don't you spile the catch by lettin' on. I don't want to be knocked down again. I'll get even with him, though." "Never heard any man ever got even with Dad. But he'd knock you down again, sure. The more he was mistook, the more he'd do it. But gold mines and pistols—" "I never said a word about pistols," Harvey cut in, for he was on his oath. "That's so. No more you did. 2 private cars, then, one named fer you an' one fer her, an' $200 a month pocket money, all knocked into the scuppers fer not workin' fer 10 1/2 a month. It's the top haul o' the season." He exploded with noiseless chuckles. "Then I was right?" said Harvey, who thought he had found a sympathizer. "You was wrong, the wrongest kind of wrong. You take right hold an' pitch in alongside o' me, or you'll catch it, an' I'll catch it fer backin' you up. Dad always gives me double helps 'cause I'm his son, an' he hates favourin' folk. Guess you're kinder mad at Dad. I've been that way time an' again, but Dad's a mighty just man. All the fleet says so." "Looks like justice, this, don't it?" Harvey pointed to his outraged nose. "That's nothin'. Lets the shore blood outer you. Dad did it for your health. Say, though, I can't have dealin's with a man that thinks me or Dad or any one on the We're Here's a thief. We ain't any common wharf end crowd by any manner o' means. We're fishermen, an' we've shipped together for 6 years an' more. Don't you make any mistake on that. I told you Dad don't let me swear. He calls 'em vain oaths, an' pounds me. But if I could say what you said about your pap an' his fixin's, I'd say that 'baout your dollars. I dunno what was in your pockets when I dried your kit, fer I didn't look to see, but I'd say, usin' the very same words as you used jest now, neither me nor Dad, an' we was the only two that teched you after you were brought aboard, knows anything about the money. That's my say. Now?" The bloodletting had certainly cleared Harvey's brain, and perhaps the loneliness of the sea had something to do with it. "That's all right," he said. Then he looked down confusedly. "Seems to me that for a fellow just saved from drowning I haven't been over and above grateful, Dan." "Well, you was shook up an' silly," said Dan. "Anyway, there was only Dad an' me aboard to see it. The cook, he don't count." "I might have thought about losin' the bills that way," Harvey said, half to himself, "instead of callin' everybody in sight a thief. Where's your father?" "In the cabin. What do you want of him again?" "You'll see," said Harvey, and he stepped, rather groggily, for his head was still singing, to the cabin steps, where the little ship's clock hung in plain sight of the wheel. Troop, in the chocolate and yellow painted cabin, was busy with a notebook and an enormous black pencil, which he sucked hard from time to time. "I haven't acted quite right," said Harvey, surprised at his own meekness.
"What's wrong now?" said the skipper. "Walked into Dan, hev you?"
"No, it's about you."
"I'm here to listen."
"Well, I'm here to take things back," said Harvey, very quickly. "When a man's saved from drownin'..." He gulped.
"Eh? You'll make a man yet if you go on this way."
"He oughtn't begin by callin' people names."
"Jest an' right. Right an' jest," said Troop, with the ghost of a dry smile.
"So I'm here to say I'm sorry." Another big gulp. Troop heaved himself slowly off the locker he was sitting on and held out an 11-inch hand.
"I mistrusted 'twould do you sights o' good. An' this shows I weren't mistook in my jedgments."
A smothered chuckle on deck caught his ear.
"I am very seldom mistook in my jedgments."
The 11-inch hand closed on Harvey's, numbing it to the elbow.
"We'll put a little more gristle to that 'fore we're done with you, young feller, an' I don't think any worse o' you for anything that's gone by. You wasn't fairly responsible. Go right about your business, an' you won't take no hurt."
"You're white," said Dan, as Harvey regained the deck, flushed to the tips of his ears.